Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, and that's New Comic Book Day, when argumentative Star Wars fans put on their very best skin-tight black Gwenpool t-shirt, brush the Dorito crumbs out of their beard, ascend the stairs of their parents' rumpus room, and head to their LCS, their local comic shop, where they stand in one place, blocking half the shelves, breathing heavily over stuff they're not going to buy. And I have mentioned on this channel before that I don't usually indulge anymore in the ritual of New Comic Book Day because I don't really read individual comics anymore. So the wall of new releases on my new comic shop, that doesn't have the appeal that it once did. I'm not following any issues. I tend instead to buy collections, graphic novel collections of stuff, of older stuff that I know I like. But I do like going to my local comic shop. So I went and I found a new graphic novel out today of stuff that I really enjoy. It's not very old. It's fairly new stuff, but I loved it anyway. And it's a collection of Secret Avengers written by Ed Brubaker and drawn by the great Mike Deodato, in which Captain America, Steve Rogers, in this series he's not Captain America. He's just a super soldier kind of guy. He decides to assemble a Black Ops team version of the Avengers. A team that isn't quite so bright headliney as the Avengers. They can do more covert undercover work. And as you can see from this cover makes use of a popular Marvel poster. So, and that's unfortunate because prominent on the cover is a character who is not a secret Avenger in Nova. But if you leave him aside, you can kind of sort of see Ant-Man, the Beast, Black Widow, Moon Knight, War Machine, and Valkyrie. Prominent on the cover is Valkyrie. The old Valkyrie, those of you who only know Marvel Comics through the movie versions will know the character name Valkyrie, but as a character, a standout character from the last Thor movie, this is not that character. Obviously, this is a tall blonde white woman instead of a black woman with black hair and face tattoos, and it's difficult. It's difficult to know what to do if you're Marvel and you do that. I mean, this Valkyrie character has a 40-year history with Marvel Comics, but she's never been in a movie, and Marvel, I think, rightly thinks that a lot of people who like the movies might wander into a comic shop and want to see that character. So this might very well be, one in a small arc of the last appearances of this version of the character. I have always liked this version of the character very much. In fact, I have to admit, when I was originally looking at these individual issues, her presence on the team was one of the main draws for me. Would have been if I'd been buying them. Just like she was a mainstay of an earlier Marvel team called the Defenders, just for 100 issues, and she was usually the main reason that I bought the book, because I've always found it fascinating that this character she's an Asgardian, same as Thor. She comes from the same extra-dimensional magical kingdom, ruled over by a god, and Thor is obviously, he's the prince of the realm. He is going to inherit the throne. So I always found it interesting that you've got this superhero in the Marvel Universe who owes personal and societal fealty to another superhero in the Marvel Universe. I don't think you get that anywhere else. It would be like if Alfred the Butler became a superhero, but was still Bruce Wayne's employee. One way or another. The books themselves, the issues themselves are fantastic, and I'm glad to have this in one collection. It's going to be great fun to reread it. There are the issues that are collected here are just the collaboration between Ed Brubaker and Mike Deodato. So I don't know actually if Secret Avengers continued after that. I have always, when I read individual comics, I read them for the art. And Mike Deodato is great. He's absolutely fantastic. So I bought this as long as he was doing it and then lost interest. And this is his run on the book. And it's two major storylines. The first one is a thingamajig that happens out in space. So the Ed Brubaker immediately gives his team a big extraterrestrial challenge like that. I found it interesting that Brubaker is one of the number of Marvel writers at the time that these were coming out, this was a few years ago, that just dispensed with the idea that Asgardians were normal biological creatures. Valkyrie does not need any kind of life support to be on an alien planet with no atmosphere. She doesn't need any kind of protection against decompression or hard vacuum or anything like that. And I'm not quite sure why she's not a bigger heavy hitter on this team. I mean, you've got War Machine, who has a variant of Iron Man's armor. But other than that, Valkyrie is by far the most powerful character on this team, according to the greatest book ever written. I refer, of course, to the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. The Valkyrie can lift 45 tons and is almost invulnerable herself and has thousands of years of combat experience. So, but anyway, she's handled fairly well in this. And the first story arc takes place on another planet. Our team goes off-world. And then the second 6-issue arc deals with, among other things, I mean, Brubaker's really good at throwing in lots of stuff into his soup. There's a super soldier who predates World War II and isn't quite the do-gooder that Captain America is. There are a whole bunch of secondary characters. There's a counterfeit Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the main plot of the second arc deals with the Marvel martial arts hero, Shang-Chi. It was very, very popular back in the 70s when martial arts was all the rage, thanks to the TV show Kung Fu. And back then, one of the big gimmicks of Shang-Chi, one of the biggest things about him, was that he was in the comics billed as the son of Fu Manchu, who once upon a time, long before you were all born, was a major marquee-level villain in pulp literature. The lord of the underworld, of the criminal underworld. And I lost track of Shang-Chi. I don't care about superheroes who don't have superpowers. Sorry for you Batman fans. But I lost track of him. And in this second arc of this collection, Shang-Chi is the main character, and his father is trying to kidnap him in order to involve him in a ritual sacrifice that will give his father enormous power. But all through the issues, I'm sure I'm going to notice again when I reread this, all through the issues, Brubaker goes out of his way not to name Fu Manchu, not to say who the character is. Everybody knows his name, and a couple of times characters are about to say it when they interrupt each other and don't. I have to imagine that that's because the Saxe-Rohmer estate, the estate of the creator of Fu Manchu, must have cracked down. Whoever owns his literary rights must have cracked down and said, if you're not paying us, you can't use that name. I can't think of any other reason why you would dispense with one of the biggest gimmicks of the original character. But one way or another, the thing I like about Brubaker is that he writes superhero comics in which superheroes talk like people. I really like that. I remember liking that about these issues, so I can't wait to read this again. Oh yeah, there we go. There's Shang-Chi on the back. Doing some kung fu fighting. This particular time around at the comic shop, even though I don't usually buy single issues, I did. I bought not only one, but two. Because there were 2 issues on the stand. I went and looked anyway, of course. I can't just go in and not look. So I looked at the new issues, and there were 2 huge milestone issues at opposite ends of the numbering spectrum. So I had to get them. And the first one was this. The Amazing Spider-Man number 800. Can you believe it? Number 800. There's an Alex Ross cover with all of the famous supporting cast. And this is the villain of the piece, who is the Green Goblin, only with a power increase and extra insanity. And it's the Norman Osborn Green Lantern, Green Goblin. It's always a bit of a jar for me when I realize that in current Marvel continuity for the last 2 decades, Norman Osborn, the original Green Goblin, is not dead. When one of the milestone issues in Marvel's early years, for me, was the death of the Green Goblin. But no, it didn't take. And this is the culmination of this storyline, Go Down Swinging, which I haven't followed. So, and I knew that. I knew when I bought the issue that it was going to be largely incomprehensible to me. I mainly did it because 800 is a big milestone, and the writer, Dan Slott, is leaving Spider-Man in the following issue, so after a long run, So they made this a big extra special issue with very few ads, lots and lots of artwork. And the reason that I got it is because for the anniversary, for the special issue, they brought in lots of artists. So it isn't just one artist doing the artwork chores throughout this whole thing, which is a bigger issue. It's many artists. And it's including some of my favorites that are currently working at Marvel. So I got it mainly for that, but also because when I was looking at it, I thought, well, your main rationale for not buying individual issues is that if something's really good or if you really want it, you'll get the collection that inevitably results. This is inevitably going to be part of a graphic novel, probably in the Christmas time. And then I thought, well, you don't know anything about the go down swinging line that this is going to be collected in, and you don't really want any of the other issues. If you were interested, you'd be buying them. So you're not going to get that graphic novel, so you might as well get this. And I read it, and it didn't make much sense to me, but there are some absolutely wonderful emotional beats in here. Some absolutely wonderful moments, including my favorite moment in the whole issue. A major character dies in this issue. A major supporting character of Spider-Man, someone who's been around since the beginning, dies in this issue. No way to know if it's permanent, but it certainly looked like it was certainly treated that way. There was a graveside funeral and everything. One of my favorite moments in here is between Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson, his longtime nemesis, who took hatred to Spider-Man right from the beginning and plagued him through the newspaper that he runs, the Daily Bugle, which ran all sorts of Spider-Man bashing stories and editorials like Spider-Man, Threat or Menace. There's a wonderful moment between the two of them. I have no idea what's going on in the Spider-Man continuity now. I confess, like probably a lot of Spider-Man fans, I lost interest in the Spider-Man continuity when there was a particular storyline. Those of you who have been following Spider-Man religiously will know immediately which one I'm talking about. Spider-Man was in love with Mary Jane Parker. He was married to her. Mary Jane Watson became Mary Jane Parker. They married each other. They were in love. They were a happy couple. And that was all retroactively changed because Spider-Man made literally a deal with the devil to have reality reworked, to have memories reworked of anybody knowing his secret identity, I guess, or... And the price was Aunt May, who was going to die, and the devil made a deal with Peter Parker. I'll save her life, but in exchange, I want your marriage. I want to rework reality so that you are not happily married and never were. And those of you who don't follow comic books, hearing even that brief synopsis will understand why I got out of individual issues, because it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And I said that, well, I didn't, of course, because I'm only 28, but a very sexy young reader back in the 1970s actually wrote a letter to Marvel Comics when Spider-Man's first girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, dies. You Spider-Man purists out there, especially the longtime ones, are going to say she was his second girlfriend. And in response to that, I say, go out, spend some money, and buy a life. But anyway, there's a landmark issue, I've mentioned it on this channel before, where Spider-Man's girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, dies at the hands of the Green Goblin. And someone from Boston wrote a couple of letters to Marvel saying it was a really powerful story, it was done really well, but this is not the right path. If you start introducing major change into a comic book, you are forced to keep doing it. The only way, at the time, that sexy reader might have been the only person thinking Spider-Man would ever get to 800. And lo and behold, here it is. And the reason why you can't summarize Spider-Man on an index card anymore is because once that wall was broken, every writer wanted to run right through it, and they have continued to do so. With the result that you've got major events, you've got event planning, you've got miniseries that are designed to pack a punch, to outrage fans, to rip apart continuity, and that won't work over 800 issues. It's fine if you're going to do that for the character you've decided you're going to cancel in 30 issues, but the only way you can do 800 issues as DC Comics, the rival company to Marvel Comics, knew right from its inception, is to write issues in which virtually nothing ever changes. That's the only way you can do it. And neither DC nor Marvel has followed that sexy young reader's advice, so now they're all about change, so God knows. And nothing is sacred. Nothing might not be changed in the next issue, including including Spiderman. So I have no idea. But I loved the issue. I thought it was fantastic. The beats of it, the emotional beats of it that were designed to appeal to me, even though I didn't know the larger story. But I admit, the thing that dragged me over to the new issue wall in order to get this was the idea of the number. Issue number 800 is an amazing landmark for Spider-Man. And the same thing drew me to the other issue that I want to show you, the number. And that's this. Man of Steel, number 1. This is the first issue of a 6-issue miniseries that will begin the writer Brian Michael Bendis' run on Superman. He's been writing for Marvel Comics. Now he's writing for DC, and he's a big deal. He's a star of the writing firmament in comic books. And he's doing a 6-issue miniseries to sort of position his version of the character, and then he will move on to write the character in the monthly comic. And that worried me. Of course, every aspect of that worried me. Not only a 6-issue miniseries called Man of Steel. Those of you who have been reading comics for a very long time will know why that would upset me. Because it's not the first 6-issue miniseries remaking the character of Superman that was called Man of Steel. A long time ago, the fan favorite writer and artist John Byrne was given carte blanche by DC to do the same thing in a 6-issue miniseries called Man of Steel. And he wreaked havoc. He rolled in a wrecking ball and wreaked havoc to 50 years of continuity and the smart, engaged, and very clever creative work of many, many people who came before him. He did what comic artists should never, ever do. He considered the character his own. When that's not true, obviously that's not true. And the way you know that's not true is because a little kid in the slums of Venezuela will know the name Superman, but he won't know the name John Byrne. Because kids put on towels and pretend they're flying in the backyard without ever having heard of Ed Brubaker or John Byrne or anybody else. You are the caretaker of these characters. You're their caretaker. You didn't create them, and they're going to be here long after you're gone. So you shouldn't do violence to them. Any more than you would go into a church and say, I don't really like how that altar is arranged. I'm only here for this one service, but I'd like you to rearrange it. Or I'll just walk up and start rearranging it yourself. In John Byrne's Man of Steel, there were many, 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 many problems. The first one that I noticed, I'm a huge fan of DC's The Legion of Superheroes, which is a legion of superheroes, of teenage superheroes in the 30th century who fight evil all across the galaxy and who were inspired by the legend of Superman when he was a boy, when he was their age, when he was a teenager, fighting crime in Smallville and elsewhere. And in John Byrne's Man of Steel, there is no Superboy. Clark Kent just grows up normal. He's a football star. How you could be a football star with someone who can crush steel in his bare hands? How you could do that without leaving a trail of corpses, I have no idea. But I read those issues and thought, wait a minute, if there's no Superboy, then there's no Legion. And DC got around that, but it was never the same. And also, this Superman was weaker, physically, much, much weaker. And he didn't rely on people just not thinking that a milquetoast reporter like Clark Kent in heavy glasses and a sloped shoulder could also be Superman, this guy flying overhead in the sunlight. He didn't just rely on that. Instead, he vibrates his head whenever he's around a camera so that nobody gets a clear shot of him. And so on and so forth and so on and so forth. There was we got a planet Krypton that was an antiseptic nightmare, a place of eyebrowless freakazoids who deserved to die, and many, many other changes. Many other changes. In fact, there would have been more changes if John Byrne had got his way. He originally went to the DC powers that be and said, I want Superman to come to Earth with his mother and grow up with her. No Kents. No Kent family farm. No Ma and Pa Kent. No, nothing like that. I want his mother to raise him as a Kryptonian on Earth and be, middle-aged when he comes to age as Superman. And DC said, no, you're out of your mind. But they didn't put the kibosh on any of the other changes, and it took the character of Superman, the comic book franchise of Superman, decades to recover from the damage that Man of Steel miniseries did. So, of course, I was worried about this one. But I was also worried because of Brian Michael Bendis, who has a long and storied career in comic books, but who has also a very obvious hatred of comic book superheroes, which is kind of odd for you to make that your career if that's how you feel. But inevitably, characters whose books he take over, the title character, not side characters, he's pretty good with side characters, but inevitably, when he takes over a book, especially with a lot of fanfare, the title character suffers. The title character becomes a warped, lessened version of what they were before, almost inevitably. He's very big on tossing in these big, blobbish ideas without having really thought them out. So I went into this issue with a great deal of trepidation, and the trepidation started on the cover. This is Man of Steel #1, the first issue of a high-profile summer miniseries reintroducing the Man of Steel in the new DC continuity by a famous writer, by a famous artist, and Superman is not on the cover. Instead, Superman and the Justice League are on the cover. And I don't really know why. I haven't the foggiest idea why the Justice League is on the cover of this book. They don't appear in the issue. They're not referenced in the issue, except for Batman, whose name comes up. Wonder Woman's name comes up. I have no idea why this is the cover of this issue. None. When it's all about Superman. But it starts off alarming. It starts off in an alarming way. A way that I thought, sure, would augur very bad things for this miniseries, and it might still. There's a main character here. There's a villainous character. His name is Rogol Zar. He's called. The scene opens with him talking to sort of a celestial council of omnipotent beings in the DC universe, and he is telling them that the planet Krypton must die, that all Kryptonians must die, because they're guilty of massive aggression against neighboring worlds. They're a blight, they're a cancer on the universe, and the only way to be sure to get rid of that cancer is to eliminate them all. And I read that, and the ruling council, one of whom at least is a guardian of the Green Lantern, the Guardians in the Green Lantern series. I recognize a couple of these other people, but they give it credence in this 2-page spread. They say, we'll think about it and we'll get back to you. And I read that and I thought, no, no. Because if they say, okay, you go ahead with it, then that is Brian Michael Bendis doing his best to say that it is true. And they don't. They don't say that. I have no idea. They keep referring, these Council of Celestial Beings keep referring to Rogol Zar as a hero who sacrificed much for the galaxy. We're supposed to see him as sort of a conflicted figure who's both good and bad. But that's what he looks like. And in DC Comics, as in Marvel Comics, in 2018, as in 1960 or 1958, if you're ugly, you're a villain. So I have no idea how he's pulled the wool over their eyes. He's obviously got to be a bad guy. But we break to Metropolis, where Superman is on nightly patrol, and he nabs two villains in a wonderful panel. This is Ivan Rice artwork, as long as he could be bothered. He does most of the pages in this much-heralded, long-prepared, marquee miniseries first issue. He does most of the pages, and then he sort of wanders off, and they get somebody else to do it. But when he has these two villains high over Metropolis, one of them is yelling out, "Don't drop me!" And Superman says, "I don't do that." And one of them says, "Batman does it all the time." And Superman says, "I know, but when he does it, it's funny." That's pretty good. He drops them off and goes to help with a fire, the latest in a long string of fires, and meets a very charismatic firewoman named Melody Moore, the introduction of a new character. And the whole time that's going on, Rogol Zar is back home on his home world, killing the local wildlife and brooding, while he waits for his answer from the Celestial Council. And he finally gets it. The Guardian, who was part of that, the Guardian of Oa, who was part of that lineup, shows up on his homeworld and gives him, we're told that he's the first guest, but considering what a gruesome place it is, I don't doubt it, gives him his answer. He says, "This visit is made out of our undying respect. The Circle listened and considered your words carefully. It has been decided that your judgment in this matter is clouded by your personal history. The answer is no. It's important to us all that you know you are not being ignored. For all that you've done for this galaxy, the sacrifices you have made, you were heard. but the Kryptonians have not acted towards anyone with aggression. Krypton must be allowed to rise and fall on its own. Okay, I breathed a sigh of relief, because that is as close as Brian Michael Bendis can do to saying that Rogol-Zar is deluded, that he's wrong about Krypton being evil. Now, the one thing, and though there's also a great panel that Ivan Rice does when the Guardian leaves him and Rogol-Zar realizes he does not have official sanction. Look at that. Look at how beautiful that is. He's just there, just totally beaten in depression on this rocky alien world. That is just lovely. And also very controlled on Bendis' part to include no dialogue, no prose of any kind on that page. So that's where this first issue leaves off. So I breathed a sigh of relief that we're not going to get a retroactive reconditioning of Krypton as a planet of supervillains. But I know what's coming. I know what's coming. I can feel it. I could be wrong. But I'm willing to bet that Brian Michael Bendis is going to finish out this series by having Rogol-Zar decide that Krypton has to die anyway and be responsible for its destruction. I could be wrong. I hope I am. but one way or another. I thought this was pretty good. I don't think I'm going to buy the other issues because I know I'm going to buy the graphic novel, but I couldn't resist getting this, even though it's a Justice League cover. And there were no other covers that I could see. So that is it. That is my my Comic Book Wednesday for you comic book fans out there. And we'll go back to books right now. So I'll see you later. Thank you, BookTube.